everybody, welcome to my channel. My name is Ellen and today we are going to be going through some top tips for keeping your plants happy in winter. If you're anything like me in wintertime, your plants do struggle a little bit and it's kind of hard to try and figure out exactly what they want. So I'm here to give you some top tips and hopefully help you revive or keep alive most of your plant collection through the winter period. So for me, that winter period starts as soon as the sun starts setting earlier in the evenings. So, you know, those darker mornings, darker evenings, you're really starting to feel the difference. And that's when, you know, you're getting less sunlight hitting your plants, less sunlight coming into your house, it's cloudier, it's a bit darker. That is when your plants are going to be starting to change, I guess, and possibly going on a bit of a decline. So my first tip is grow lights. Now, I appreciate that grow lights involve electricity and they involve purchasing something else for your plants, which, as we all know, plants can be expensive enough as they are. However, I absolutely love grow lights. I think they're a really important part of keeping your plants alive through winter. I have 4 lots of grow lights now throughout my property. And one grow light in particular that I do love is one that I got from Grow Star stores. And I will link the video above of the video that I did on that particular grow light, and I absolutely love it. But I will link as much as I can the links for all of the grow lights that I've got in my house already. And I'll try and sort of show you a little bit of them as well. But yeah, so grow light, I just believe that is probably the number one thing for me when it comes to winter. So you're basically trying to imitate the sunlight that they're not getting, especially if you want your plants to continue to grow and continue to thrive, because a lot of plants, if they're not getting a lot of sunlight, will go dormant through the winter period. Now, if you are using grow lights, obviously this could affect other aspects of your winter routine as well, which leads me on to my next tip for you. So obviously I'm kind of trying to work all of these tips into one big suggestion, I guess. So hopefully you'll take on board a lot of these tips and kind of use them all together. So the second tip I have for you is to do with watering. So my tip through winter would be to water your plants only slightly less. Now, a lot of people say, do you know what? It's hit winter time, therefore I am going to go from watering my plants once or twice a week to now watering my plants once a month or once every 3 weeks. This is not an accurate change in watering. Like, you really need to keep an eye on your plants and see what you think they need. Like, it's really difficult to just suddenly sit there and say, do you know what? I'm going to suddenly start watering my plants like half the amount, because you don't necessarily know if that's going to be an adequate change. So for me, I would gradually do it. So, I mean, for most of my plants that are under grow lights, I would just stick to the same watering routine. So they will still get watered once a week, once every 2 weeks, depending on what type of plant they are, obviously. And I would just stick to that throughout, no matter what happens. Same with fertilization. I would still fertilize the same as I normally do. However, if my plants are outside of grow lights, because I do want to sort of make this video for everybody, I would, and I do have some that aren't under grow lights and still in windows and all sorts of things and up on shelves. And for these plants, I would gradually start reducing my watering, because if you suddenly hit it with half the amount of watering, there is a good chance that it is going to completely backfire on you, and that is the last thing that you want. So yeah, I would start by just reducing it slightly, maybe by 1 or 2 days. You know, when you start to notice it getting a little bit dry, maybe give it that extra day and then water it, and the next time it might need a little bit less. But you really have to just pay attention to your plant, pay attention to the soil. So is this a plant that needs watering when it's dry? If so, wait for that soil to be dry. Don't jump to it just because you normally water it at that time, or don't wait longer just because you feel like you have to, you know. So yeah, there's certainly a lot to learn from the watering side of things, and I really do think it's really important to just read up on watering of plants, what your plants need in particular when it comes to watering, and just make sure that you're kind of paying attention to each individual plant because everyone will be different. Next on my list is move your plants away from the heating. So I don't really think that people actually understand how much of an effect heating can have on plants. Now, once again, this does really vary from plant to plant. So you can't 100% sit there and say, do you know what, that plant is going to die if it stays above that heating, I must move it, okay? However, majority of plants will be affected in some way by it. So it's, in my opinion, it's worth monitoring it. And if you see differences that you don't normally see within your plant, then do just move them away. I mean, for me, the biggest thing is having plants hanging over the heating. So I have 3 hanging plants in my window and they sit directly above the heating. However, some of them sit higher above the heating than others. The ones that sit higher up are absolutely fine. They don't seem to mind at all. I have my Hoya Wyetii there, centre of the window, right up high, and it's absolutely fine and it's still thriving, still doing really well. I then have a Marble Queen Pothos sat above my heating and it hangs right down and it's only about maybe that much above my heating, and therefore I find that that one is struggling a little bit. However, I've been monitoring it and it's not too bad. The biggest thing I notice is that it dries out quicker. So that's when it goes back to that whole watering situation again. If you're reducing your watering and then it's also sat over the top of your heating, the chances are you will see some sort of decline within that plant. So it's really important to just pay attention once again to how they're doing above that heating or near it. If you've got a really sensitive plant like calatheas or something along those lines, 100% just move it away because it will affect it big time. It doesn't matter how much you want to give it a go, it just won't like it. Calatheas, as we know, can be really tricky plants, and suddenly chucking on heating next to it is never going to work. So yeah, just be really mindful of that and sort of pay attention to your plant and how they're doing. The biggest things I tend to notice is, like I said, the soil's drying out quicker. So you might need to just, rather than moving the plant away, you might need to just adjust your watering. The other thing I notice is the leaves can droop quite a lot and you might get some yellowing or browning in your leaves. So if the leaves dry up too much, they go that brown crispy sort of look, and that can have an effect as well. I think I actually... not on this side. I did actually have an example here. I don't know how well you can see this, but this guy was sat too close to the heating and he did actually start to get just some brown ends here. So just a little bit of an example there for you. But yeah, that sort of browning is an insight into your plant being too close to the heater, especially if it's touching that heater, that's going to get really hot. So yeah, just maybe, even if it's just shimming it away a little bit, like a couple of inches, that might just be all it needs. But certainly just be very wary of your heating at that time of year. The next tip that I have for you is humidity. So I appreciate that not everybody has humidifiers, not everyone has the need for them. However, I do have a couple of tips to increase humidity without purchasing a humidifier, especially if you only have a couple of plants and you're not really into sort of the plant investment. So if you don't have a humidifier, the best thing to do is to group your plants together. Keep them in a warm situation, but once again away from the heating because the heating's going to dry out the air. So you want them to be warm, but you want them to be away from the heating. Group them together because when plants are bunched together, it just automatically creates humidity between them from the watering and things like that. And put maybe a couple of jars or pots or glasses of water near them. This will really help to increase the humidity. And you can also add a bit of a spritz over the top every now and again if you want to. However, I appreciate a lot of people feel like that doesn't help at all. I've certainly noticed with, I actually trialled this a little bit because I wanted to see how it worked. And it's something that I've done ever since. I have a Calathea White Fusion that I sit on top of like a little tray with stones in. Add a little bit of water in the base of it, so that it can sort of slowly suck it up when it wants the water, but also it's a really good way to increase the humidity because that water's there and it's in that environment. And then I have obviously, like I said, tested it in groups as well. And when you do have jars of water or things like that around, it does really help the humidity, especially if you have like some sort of closed in environment. So I know like IKEA shelves and things like that are really popular these days. And if you do have an IKEA shelf, or cabinet, sorry, I should say, an IKEA greenhouse cabinet, I would 100% suggest you getting a humidifier. I'm currently in the process of purchasing one for my greenhouse cabinet, And I certainly think that that's just a huge improvement to your plants' environments. And the biggest thing that you will find from lack of humidity is your leaves will get smaller. Your leaves will get smaller when they're growing, and they will start to decline. So that's a really key thing to keep an eye out for. And yeah, I would certainly just group them closer together, put some water around, keep them away from the heating. Also keep them away from open windows, which I'd like to think your own windows aren't open in the winter, but you never know. For instance, I keep my bathroom window open through winter because I get quite a lot of like mold and mildew build up and moisture in there. However, that is also quite a good situation to have plants in. So some plants can thrive better near those sorts of situations. However, some plants and some soil as well, if you have quite a mildewy, wet room, can cause sort of mold growth on top of the soil and things. So yeah, really important to sort of keep an eye on and keep checking over. Now, the second to last tip that I have for you is to keep your leaves clean. Now, I haven't really done a lot of discussion on cleaning the leaves and things like that, and I will put out a video on what I use to clean my leaves and how I do that if that's something you want to see. Do pop that down in the description below, and I can do comment down below, and I can certainly do a video on that for you. However, the reason why I'm suggesting that you clean your leaves, whether it's literally a damp cloth that you wipe over, whether it's neem oil, whether it's a special solution, whatever you want to use, I just think it's really important to make sure that your leaves can get as much sunlight as possible. If you're not cleaning your leaves and you're creating lots of dust buildup and things like that over the top of your leaves, it stops the sunlight from being able to get to your plants. Your plants need sunlight. That is the one thing that they 100% need to be able to survive. That and water are the two biggest things. If your leaves are dirty, they're not going to get that sunlight. And especially in the winter when there's a massive reduction in sunlight anyway, it is just such an important thing. So definitely make sure your leaves and your plants are nice and clean. Even, like I said, if that is just once a week, whipping around and giving them all a good wipe over, just with a damp cloth, it doesn't really matter, but that is a really good time to do that. That then also kind of leads into my final tip, which is to check your plants regularly. Now, this one doesn't necessarily relate directly to winter. I certainly think that you should check your plants weekly anyway. When you're cleaning your leaves though, however, in winter, that is a great time to do this. So you can kind of combine the two tasks into one. Now, I would check top, bottom, stems in any crevices, especially if you have... what am I thinking of? Something like Hoya compactor. You really need to make sure you're checking inside those leaves and inside the crevices. But yeah, all down the backs and everything, mainly for bugs is the biggest thing, and that's all year round. However, in the winter, it's also important to check that your plants aren't too cold. There's not any signs of like leaf browning that you haven't noticed, or yellowing of leaves that you haven't noticed. So that final check over is just to make sure that all the things that you have in place for your winter process is working. Okay, because if you are noticing browning of the leaves, it might be that you're underwatering your plants, or they're too close to the heating. If your leaves are going yellow, it might be that you're overwatering them, or that your soil's holding on to its water too much, and you need to aerate the soil a little bit better. Or, like I said about drooping leaves, that could be a really big indication of the heating as well, that it's just a bit too much for your plant. Yes, there's loads of different things there. Also, obviously, if your plants feel really cold, plants always feel cool, but there can be a difference between the feel of them. So if they're in a nice humid situation and the room's quite warm, then they should just feel a little bit cold. However, if they feel like ice, then yeah, I would definitely suggest you really look at that location of where your plants are and maybe increase the temperature a little bit in your room. I really hope that these tips have been helpful for you, and they do help you to sort of keep your plants alive and thriving at this time of year. I'm certainly starting to notice that the plants that are struggling a little bit now, so I thought it'd be a really good time to just pop out this video and really making sure we're nailing down some of these tips. If you liked my video today, please don't forget to hit that subscribe button, because it really does mean a lot to me. And yeah, I will see you in my next video. Bye!